The bird or the cage? The answer seems obvious, but it's not so black and white if all you know of the world are those pretty golden bars of your prison. Hanako Arasaka is sort of a crowning jewel of the Arasaka crown. Beautiful, intelligent, kind, all the things her father ever wanted her to be. All the things she was expected to be. But nothing is ever as pristine as it seems, especially in the chromed up world of cyberpunk. Beauty is, after all, only skin deep, and it can never completely hide the cold steel that lies beneath. Welcome to Shaped by Stories, where we discuss how and why our favorite stories shape our own. Let's get into it. Hanako was born to Saburo Arasaka and his third and final wife, Michiko, who died of complications after her birth. But rather than resent his youngest child, Saburo adored her. Beautiful, polite, smart, and sweet, she was picture perfect in his eyes, and Saburo intended to keep her that way. Hanako grew up in the confines of the Arasaka family compound, an incredibly protected residence in Japan that has been home to the Arasaka family since the early 1900s. Her name, Hanako, translates to flower child, not the hippie meaning of the West, but rather, from what I understand, a literal flower child, as Hanako was the blossom of the family. The logo of the Arasaka family is supposed to be, much like the Tokugawa shogunate of the Edo period, a blooming three-part hollyhock. The dragon has 3 heads, the hollyhock has 3 blooms, and for all intents and purposes, in Cyberpunk 2077, you could definitely argue the blooms are Hanako, Yorinobu, and Saburo. But of course, not all survive the events of this game intact, in most cases. The only way Arasaka stays standing, really, is if they all do. Hanako was educated by the best tutors, handpicked by her father. She was outfitted with the best cyberware and protected by the best soldiers Arasaka could train. She had everything except her freedom. Hanako has never been allowed to be physically free. She only really left the compound perhaps once a month as an adult, and even then, always under heavy guard. She was never really allowed to be alone. Even by time 2077 comes around, it is so ridiculously unheard of for her to even leave Japan. That's why it's in the news. But as much as Saburo physically constrained her, he couldn't quite stop her from net running. This isn't conveyed in-game all that much, but Hanako Arasaka is actually one of the better net runners in the cyberpunk world. She's good enough that she was actually able to understand Soulkiller more than most runners ever had, save the program's creator, Alt Cunningham. Hanako is good enough that she's capable of altering Soulkiller. As Hanako grew up, she found more and more solace in the freedom the net offered her, though she chafed under her father's protection. Hanako always loved her father very dearly, or as dearly as the Arasaka family could. So she put up with all of his constraints and rules without complaint. Although Hanako resolved to live her life the way she wanted to once her father passed away, she would live until then mindful of his wishes. She was even willing to deal with an arranged marriage to benefit the corporation should that need to happen. For her, time and age wasn't so much of an issue as it might be for pretty much everybody else. Hanako had all the best cosmetic and anti-aging cyberware, so she could afford to wait for a while for her freedom. Fun fact, when we meet Hanako in 2077, she is 77 years old. She was born the same year as me, 1999. But if I was in Cyberpunk, I would look like dog shit because I'd be poor. You're not ugly, just broke. But as pretty and proper as she looked, as much as all the gold she wears might try to convey perfection or purity, There is an interesting little reason as to why her fingers are gold. Hanako has Raynaud's disease, one of the main symptoms of it being a lack of blood flow to the fingers. So no, not even Saburo's perfect daughter was technically perfect. But damn it if she wasn't going to try to be. Yorinobu is Hanako's elder brother, sharing the same mother as well as father. While they both had an elder brother, Kei, from their father's first marriage, they were never quite as close with him. Kei ended up dying in the Fourth Corporate War, leaving them the two surviving offspring of Saburo Arasaka. But as close as these two siblings were, they couldn't have been more different. Yorinobu was a born rebel. Even though he's the technical antagonist, or at least one of them in 2077, he's actually not the worst guy. If anything, in the Arasaka family, he's probably the most decent person. When Saburo Arasaka let Yorinobu in on the more darker aspects of the Arasaka Corporation, Yorinobu didn't take to it the way his father had hoped. He was horrified, and he rebelled against his father for a time. He left home, and he ran with his own gang. That's putting his story very simply, as this is a video about Hanako, but I will get more into that whole period of his life in his video. Either way, his dad was not thrilled nor impressed. But even while he was on the outs with his father and Arasaka, he still kept up communications with Hanako. But only through the net, and probably in relative secret. Hanako was kept in the dark when it came to a lot of these family corporate secrets for a long time, but when she was eventually entrusted with them, she actually became one of their most dedicated keepers. Hanako knows a lot about Arasaka's dirty laundry. Her clearance is probably only just next to her father's. As kind and sweet as everyone perceived her to be, Hanako could hold aside her own moral compass, as well as her own desires for her life, in favor of the company, which was treated as an extension of the Arasaka family. This was hammered into her from a very young age. After all, her father raised her so closely to a very ideal line, with him as the sort of center of her universe. To be loyal to that family and to its center above all else. It's really sad. Hanako took that loyalty very seriously. In fact, it was her who convinced her father to accept Yorinobu's plea for forgiveness at Kei's funeral. This temporarily stitched the rift that had formed in the Arasaka family core. But of course, this rebellion of her brother's was already predicted to come under control anyway. A far cry from what he would do in 2077. No matter how Hanako may have advised her brother to mind their father, to remain loyal to the family, and to know his role in it, he had a mind of his own. A lot like his father in that sense, I think. After Yorinobu stole the relic, Hanako accompanied her father on a rare trip outside Japan. This was such a big deal that it was mentioned on the news that she was in Night City. She's kind of an enigma, a mystery, as Saburo's done everything he can to keep his daughter's life as secretive as possible. He never relinquishes control of even her public narrative. And while I do think, sure, a part of Saburo's overprotection of his daughter's reputation could definitely be from genuine care and love, I do think a part of it is because he views his children as extensions of himself, which we see with Yorinobu, but with Hanako, she, I think, is the picture-perfect child, the picture-perfect extension of him. And we do end up seeing this with how she minds her father with her actions later on in the story. She's almost like his secret weapon, his most effective tool that he has made. For somebody to spread rumors about it is probably a dent in his ego, in the same way That ego, I think, is the reason why he decided to announce to the world in the devil ending that he has taken over his son's body, because he has so much of an ego that he would be like, I'm not gonna pretend to be this fool, I'm Saburo Arasaka. An interesting thing to note is that the events at Konpeki Tower were almost extremely different, as Hanako offered to handle things with her brother once again in her father's place. She was willing to broker a sort of peace between the two of them. But Saburo said no. Hanako's ability to ask her father the difficult questions that he avoided asking himself are also what convinced him to not bomb Night City. He did not want to have that discussion with her. Protecting the family from itself was yet another thing Hanako has to do throughout her life, even from her father's ego. But as we all know, Saburo is murdered by his son that night, and Hanako is told by her brother that whoever did it, it wasn't him. Some mysterious assassin poisoned their father. Hanako is suspicious of her brother from the very beginning. This is why Hanako is able to believe V's story as quickly as she does. I do think she was probably aware of Oda's meeting with Takamura and V, and she probably did hear the same story that he did, but this story would have been retold through Oda's unconvinced words and her own grief and confusion. She agrees to give a eulogy for her father in a grand parade in Japantown, where V and Takamura conspire to kidnap her. Now, there's a few things to note about the parade. The song she sings here is called Kojo no Suki, a Japanese song from the early 20th century. While its lyrics can vary in translation, they speak of a bygone age. It conjures an image of the moon and how, as ages pass, the moon remains. It has seen it all. The light of the moon remains unchanged. It continues to shine. In some ways, I can't help but view Hanako as the moon, the one stabilizing force in Arasaka, in the face of all this chaos. The fact that she's almost always wearing white really kind of makes me think of like a more luminous figure. You could definitely see the white and gold that she wears as always being a sign of her purity, how perfect she is in appearance. But of course, underneath, Hanako is a very cold person, I think, able to commit terrible acts and set aside her own softer feelings to do what has to be done. White is also a color that signifies new beginnings in a way, and I find it interesting that at the parade she's wearing red and gold, and red can be a color that represents anger, it can represent heartache and violence even, but it can also be a way of Hanako sort of showing that she's mourning. She's just showing her heart here in how sad she is about what happened with her father. But I like that, she goes from that to donning white and gold. This change of color just shows that she's ready to do what she has to do. She's on a mission. It might be a dress, but in a way it's sort of like her armor. The thing too with all the gold accents she wears is that gold is considered a symbol of wealth, yes, but it's also a symbol of sort of something that's uncorruptible, as gold doesn't really rust. But of course this feels like it goes both ways. For one thing, it does feel like the gold is just hiding the fact that Hanako is a very corrupt person on the inside. But if you look at it from the Arasaka perspective, she is incorruptible. To her father, she is undyingly loyal. I love how her fingers are gold. They're the one thing that is wearing that metal that is supposed to be incorruptible, but in the end, as I'll talk about later, it is through her hands that her brother dies and her father returns. The other thing too I want to note about Hanako's appearance is how perfect and almost doll-like it is, especially when she's wearing that jacket. Like, her hair is never a mess. She's always put together. And then the fact that she does send a doll, more or less, to speak through at the motel. She really is kind of a character with no agency of her own, but it's not just her father's fault after a certain point because of the choices she makes. It's just This is turning into a tangent, but it's just, I do want to feel bad for Hanako because, you know, she was raised to be who she is, but the fact that she does have dissenting opinions of her own yet acts in spite of them just makes me go, girl, no. And my last note on this tangent about Hanako's design is the fact that in Buddhism, one of the more major religions in Japan, is that white represents death. And aside from, you know, gray, the main color that we do end up seeing in the devil ending is white. I don't know, now when I look at Hanako's design, I just sort of see, like, her design was warning us. It's no coincidence that Hanako is represented by the tarot card of the High Priestess, which we find outside the building that Goro Takamura takes her to after she is kidnapped during the parade. And the High Priestess is, as it says in the in-game codex, a card of mystery. It's a woman with a red eye, decked out in white and gold, and she's blocking something. She's blocking something and standing almost on like a webbed surface. And it is said that the High Priestess is, as well as mysterious, is also sort of a cold figure. She is also loyal to the Emperor, a card that represents her father. The other thing too about this scene, namely her conversation with Yorinobu, is that Hanako has always felt like she's had to go along with what her father wants. She's not oblivious to the fact that she's sort of a puppet. Yorinobu has never made her feel like that. She's always trusted and loved her brother, but on the call with him in the float, she admits that with all the things that she's doing in Night City, she's feeling like she's his puppet. In a way, yes, Yorinobu does need Hanako to appear on his side to appease the faction of Arasaka that is loyal to her, the Kiji faction, versus his Taka faction. The Kiji faction is the conservative members of the company, the old techno guard loyal to Saburo Arasaka. Hanako is sort of the vanguard of Arasaka as it was, but she doesn't have the factual ammo to stand up against her brother, nor the total certainty of his role in her father's death. I also want to note here, though, that Yorinobu does love his sister above all else. He's not lying about her safety being his utmost concern, and he tells her that he'll call all these events regarding their father and his death and the corporation off if that's what she wants. I genuinely believe he means this, and she knows this too, which is why she agrees to carry out her role for him. When Takamura shows up and tries to explain her brother's role in her father's death, she denies it. She doesn't want to hear it, and she rejects the tea he offers her after she's been kidnapped by him. But when V starts explaining what happened that night, as well as the fact that they died and the relic is slowly replacing their brain with Johnny Silverhand, she starts to listen. Because Hanako happens to have a big secret herself. But before an alliance can be properly formed, a squad of Arasaka soldiers, led by Adam Smasher, the best person you could possibly pick for a rescue mission, I'm joking, attacks V and Takamura, taking Hanako back with them. V and Takamura, should you save him, end up scattered to the wind, with the former taking refuge at the Sunset Motel. While V and Johnny are lying low, Hanako sends a proxy to find them, through whom she is able to speak with V. She admits there's not much she can do from where she is, and that she fears for her own life since the attack. It's not clear to Hanako that it was supposed to be a rescue attempt rather than an attack on her, but because of it, her trust in her brother is shattered. All this time, Hanako's love for her brother has been what has held her back from taking action against him, despite the suspicions that she herself had about his role in their father's death. But now, she knows that she needs to take Yorinobu out of the seat of power, both for her own sake as well as for the corporation's sake. After all, she's basically under the impression that she is a prisoner or that she could have been killed and that who knows what might happen to her next. She doesn't really realize that Yorinobu never wanted to hurt her, and I'll get into that in the next video. In a way, her father had always held her captive similarly for most of her life, and now her brother was doing it. Hanako always swore to herself that she would live by her own rules when her father passed, yet here she was, being denied that long-expected freedom in a world with Arasaka as she's always known it. I think that Arasaka is changing so much under her brother is very scary for her. All she's ever known is the Arasaka of her father. She asks V to obtain a copy of Soul Killer and to contact her once they have it. In exchange, she will help them with their relic problem, or so she says. Despite the hold her father had on the reins of her life, Hanako still cared for him. It's gotta hurt her to know that her brother did betray the family, the one thing that she has been raised to never betray, and it probably also really hurts because of the fact that she was so close to preventing it from happening. If only her father had let her go talk to her brother. And of course, Hanako feels scared of what might happen to her, considering how much of the old guard of her father that she embodies. At Embers, Hanako admits to V that she, along with numerous other board members, had always doubted Yorinobu's story. Her love is no longer enough to hold her back. The only way of life that Hanako is familiar with after 87, 88 years of life. A life where Arasaka, her family, has been on top of the world. An empire in practice, if not by name, is about to be ripped away from her. I can't help but feel like her father knew exactly what he was doing, making her so reliant on the world she knew, even if she aspired to be free someday. A taste of this new and free world that she dreamed of was enough to convince her that maybe things weren't so bad in the first place. Hanako, in her mind, has to push back, or else she would be a prisoner forever if she wasn't killed first. Hanako explains that there is a chance of an actual coup, a successful one, with the support of much of the board, but she needs V's testimony. Now, she's withholding a lot here. This lady is withholding so much, and she never stops withholding. There is a reason her tarot card is the High Priestess, with all of her mystery and secrets and manipulation and loyalty to the Emperor above all else. After her rescue from Arasaka Manor, where she's being held, Hanako heads to Arasaka Tower, with V, Hellman, and hopefully Takamura. And here, we learn the secret Hanako's been keeping, the reason she needs Soul Killer, and the core of the reason why she was so interested in V's experience with the relic. Her father's engram exists in Mikoshi, and she intends to bring him back, though she doesn't quite spell out that last part as much. The combined retelling of V's perspective during Saburo's murder, as well as the word of Saburo's engram, ties the bow on the board and places them under Hanako's thumb. Yorinobu's Taka soldiers attack, however, killing much of that board, though, with V's intervention, Hanako survives. She has one major order for V and Takamura. Not a hair is to be harmed on her brother's head. If he is killed, V will get no help with the relic, and will, I guess, probably be killed, I would assume. When V gets to Yorinobu, though, he doesn't fight. He doesn't even have the strength to take his own life. He just has a gun with one bullet in it, and he says it's not for you. So Hanako arrives in the room with Yorinobu, and at first, it appears that she's comforting her brother in his final moments, before he is imprisoned or killed. Some players say, however, if you look really close at the siblings as you're walking away towards the elevator, Hanako slips a certain chip into her brother's head. I can't say that I've noticed that, but knowing this game, I wouldn't doubt it. I will try to capture it, but if I don't, then you're probably just gonna see like a picture of my dog. Yeah. The devil ending is not a super common one, I think, from what I understand. Most people never go for it, but it kind of rivals the Phantom Liberty ending for me as my favorite ending because I like the depressing endings. I don't know why, I don't know what's wrong with me. But the implications of why V is on that space station, why the tests are so rigorous and unending, is even darker than what is outwardly spelled out. I think the reason why Hanako agreed to help V deal with the relic in exchange for their testimony, as well as, running around and getting Soul Killer and all that, is because of the fact that V died and had their brain rewritten by the construct on the chip. The reason why that's interesting to her is because it's exactly the process that needed to happen with Yorinobu's body, as V is the first to have this consciousness change occur. I do think all of the research done on V, all the tests, readings, everything, are what helped Saburo to take over Yorinobu's body as cleanly and as quickly as he did, aside from the fact that, as we are told, there is a tissue compatibility, as, Yorinobu and Saburo being father and son. I believe that Yorinobu was always intended to be a vessel, at least for so long as relic tech has existed. Maybe that's why he fought so hard against his father, against Arasaka. Maybe that's why he saw him as a monster. Hanako says Yorinobu does not know his place. Perhaps he did. And perhaps Hanako would have furthered his line of potential hosts. Hanako was raised to be the perfect vessel for his future vessels. Like, really, she was educated and conditioned to be loyal. Her reputation was kept spotless. She will be young and beautiful and will likely live far longer than her father did. She knew what to do with the engram when the time came. Who knows what else Hanako knew? Maybe she always knew that what happened with her brother here was always bound to happen somehow. She was just trying to avoid admitting it. Maybe Saburo always knew it would go down like this, and that's why he had the relic made and everything. Hanako Arasaka, while by no means a morally upstanding character, is far more fascinating than meets the eye. Beneath those golden fingertips lie the corruption hidden within. Hands that gave her father new life, while taking that of her beloved big brother. For the sake of her family, for Arasaka. V was never a key player in Hanako's game. V was just a very important guinea pig. She used and led V on, and once all the work that she needs from V is done, she just drops them cold. She doesn't pick up V's calls, she doesn't answer any of V's questions. She never cared, and she's showing that. All Hanako cared about was the family. She did tell us this in Embers after all. She basically leaves V for dead once she gets all she needs from V, and sends Takamura to V with a treat on a stick to get them out of their hair. She is indeed a corpo ice queen. And considering the fact that we see Saburo speaking through Yorinobu's body on the news, V was an invaluable resource that has reached its expiration date. Hanako emerged from her cage just long enough to fix it, to dupe a merc dumb enough to believe that yes, this corporate princess, this mysterious high priestess character would absolutely help them. And once the work was done, she set aside her own feelings and her own dreams, hopped back in, and locked her cage door behind her. But when you think about it, given everything her life has been, and the very small sphere of what she's known, it's unsurprising that she took away her one and only chance at freedom. A gift of freedom that her brother tried so hard to give her, the sister who would ultimately take his body and give it to the ultimate monster of their lives. And that has been my own take on Hanako Arasaka based on the stories that have shaped me. And I want to hear what you think of Hanako Arasaka in the comments below. Was she just someone that you were like getting heebie-jeebies from the very beginning? Or did you actually kind of be like, oh, maybe she'll help us? It's just like, oh, no, she didn't. No, she won't even answer my calls. Thank you so much to my members for watching. You guys are awesome. And also for just being members. It means a lot. Thank you for your financial support. Hell yeah. And thank you to literally everybody. I really appreciate you guys for watching. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I will see you again in the next one. Goodbye.